Well, here we are, folks. It's already 1 year on with the Sony A1. And boy, what a camera. Well, is it still the best production wildlife camera at the moment on the market? Has it held up in the field, actual use in the field? Is it still as robust and as good as it was a year ago? What are the strong points of this camera, and are there any negatives? Well, hello and welcome to an episode of Camilla and I. I'm Mark Cooper, and I do honest reviews on equipment that I actually use for my wildlife photography. And the Sony A1 has become firmly entrenched in our arsenal of photography gear. I mean, we have got quite a bit of gear, but yep, the Sony A1 is the go-to camera at the moment. So after a year of use in the field, is the Sony A1 still the best wildlife camera available? Well, that's open to debate, and I certainly have not used the R5, R3 or the Nikon Z9. So I really don't know. I can't answer that question. But I do know the 50 megapixels image quality of this camera takes it to another level. And the ability to shoot 30 frames per second, it is absolutely incredible. Every wing beat, every heartbeat is captured in this camera. So it is absolutely beautiful rendition of photographs. It is the best that I have ever used and I've ever been able to reproduce. Of course, what you get with mirrorless is what you see through the viewfinder, and the viewfinder on the Sony A1 has improved out of all proportion. This viewfinder has gone to, I think it's 2.3 million dots, but it's far in excess of the A9 II. And indeed now it's got to the point where I tend not to use the A9 II because I can't see as clearly through the viewfinder as the A1. The advancement of the viewfinder alone is well worth the extra money from the A9 II. So the bird eye autofocus is another key feature which takes the already lightning speed of the A9 II to another level, because particularly we do a lot of bird photography on Camilla and I, and to actually have within range, as long as the bird's within about 50 foot, and it depends on the size of the bird, you do get this dot appear over the eye of the bird, and you know you're in focus. Absolutely amazing feature, and it's common now to the R3, R5 Nikon Z9, so it's no longer unique, but it's certainly a big advantage in wildlife photography. So is it in good condition after a year of use in the field? Well, I did actually come to blows recently, not with someone else, but Camilla hit the deck. I was rushing back to the car and I left the camera bag open, and it toppled out of the bag with the big lens on the front, and it just caught the back of the screen. So I don't think I'll be able to reproduce it very well, but it has slightly cracked the back of the screen. So hardly surprising really. It did hit a pavement. Well, it wasn't a pavement, it was hard gravel near the car. So yeah, amazing the camera survived at all really. But yes, it is really robust, and apart from this crack on the screen. Also, we had a firmware update after its initial release. This is quite common with a new camera, and it corrected a couple of issues which were really quite minor. It was the operation of the viewfinder in bright light. There were certain circumstances when it didn't close off as it should and go to the back screen, and vice versa. But and the autofocus, there was something on the autofocus, but we must admit, on Camilla and I, we never really had a problem, and indeed we've had no problem with the operation of this camera at all since the firmware update. It has worked flawlessly, and we must have at least 100,000 shutter actuations in its first year of use. Well, to sum up the condition of the camera, it's almost as good, apart from a slightly cracked screen, as it was a year ago. It still works exactly the same in superb conditions, and apart from, let's put it down as usual wear and tear, because it does get some use on Camilla and I. Yeah, so the strong points are obviously the viewfinder, the autofocus, the 50 megapixels, the 30 frames per second. I mean, it is incredible, absolutely incredible. But also the low light performance is a surprise as well. I did not expect it to perform as well as the A9 II. Indeed, that's partly why I kept on the A9 II, because I thought it wouldn't perform as well in low light, being a 50 megapixel camera as opposed to 25. But I can hardly discern a difference between the low light capabilities of the A9 II and the Sony A1. Perhaps if people would like to bear that out in the comments below if you own the A1. It is phenomenal in low light. Of course, here I'm not really touching on the movie capabilities of this camera, but needless to say, it is absolutely phenomenal as well. 4K video at 120 is my preferred setting, and you may have seen a few examples of that on Camilla and I. And yeah, beautiful footage obtained just from all this tiny compact package. And indeed, that's one thing I'd say, the ergonomics of this camera are pretty good. I did buy a battery grip, and I experimented with that in my early days of use with the camera, but I actually found that it just added to the bulk and weight of the camera and was an unnecessary purchase. So yeah, try in your local Castle Cameras camera shop, whatever your local shop is, see if they'll let you try one on first, because I've really taken it off now and it's a redundant bit of kit. So yeah, which is quite expensive. So yeah, don't necessarily rush to get to battery grip. The ergonomics of this camera are pretty good to start with. Another strong point of the A9 series cameras, in particular on Sony, was the battery life. And the Sony A1, again, I thought perhaps it would have a weaker battery life, because obviously it's a new camera, new processor, 50 megapixels, etc., 120 video. But realistically, I am lucky. I usually shoot for about 2 hours at a time, and if I go into the second battery on a shoot, then that's unlikely. But yes, I have got 4 batteries for this camera, but I only actually ever usually use 2. So I suppose we better come on to some of the weak points of the Sony A1. And of course, right from the get-go, the problem with the Sony A1 is the price. I mean, it is still here in the UK, it's £6,500. I will be reviewing cheaper cameras in the future, because I realise that this is well beyond the price of your average photographer, and this is the real bugbear. The autofocus can still be beaten. It's not infallible. I mean, this is where the skill and pre-focusing comes into play. I mean, I still pre-focus with this camera, and the autofocus system and the bird eye focus is amazing. But again, it's just in certain situations, low light, low contrast, painful. Came a cropper with the video. I must admit, on my last video, I think, a hen harrier just disappeared into the tree line, and the autofocus just couldn't pick it up at all. So yeah, I mean, it's not infallible. Thank goodness. Thank goodness there's some skill still left in the... So if you're really serious about your wildlife photography, you really cannot get much better than the Sony A1. Even an advanced beginner would benefit from a Sony A1. Let's make no bones about it. Particularly paired with, say, the Sony 200 to 600, or indeed the 100 to 400 millimeter lens. So quite incredible. But obviously we pair it now with the 600 millimeter, which is the ultimate challenge really for wildlife photography, operating at 600 millimeters. So although I wouldn't recommend obviously this camera for a beginner, it would certainly improve anybody's wildlife photography at any stage they are in their development. So if you've got £6,500, rush out and get one. Castle Cameras, Salisbury, I always recommend a local supplier, and yeah, get one, because it is well worth it. It's the best wildlife camera I have ever used, and yeah, it is a phenomenal beast of a camera. You certainly have less chance of missing that decisive moment which you definitely get in wildlife photography. This is far more likely to capture it than anything else out there on the market at the moment. I mean, who knows what's next for camera technology. I mean, perhaps we'll get 100 megapixels next. Would 100 megapixels work on Camilla and I's photography? Possibly not. But this is certainly the best all-round camera as well at the moment. If you're into landscapes, portraits, etc., and a bit of movie, incredible the quality that you can obtain from just this tiny little box. It's not a heavy little box, but it's a tiny little box. So yeah, get your order in with Castle Cameras. Get one now. I can't recommend it enough. After a year of use, yeah, I have got a cracked screen, but yeah, that was my fault. Nothing to do with the camera. So yeah, an absolutely awesome bit of kit, and central to Camilla and I. Yeah. Anyway, please leave comments below, and if you've got any questions of my year of use with the Sony A1, and whether you're going to get one, let me know in the comments below, please. Always interested to hear what other photographers are going to go buy, and indeed whether you're going for the equivalent Canon or Nikon Z9 now, because they're equally phenomenal cameras. But yeah, the Sony A1, looking at all the reviews I've seen so far, is still, I believe, the best at the moment, but to be superseded soon, no doubt. Anyway, don't forget, have a good one. It's the camera you have in your hand at the time that counts. It doesn't matter how good the A1 is, you have to be in the right spot at the right time. So have a good one. Bye from Camilla and I.